The discovery of the diary felt like stumbling upon buried treasure, a relic from a past life tightly entwined with layers of dust and memories. I found it beneath the loose floorboard, hidden amongst a stash of forgotten things, the kind of secrets houses keep once their owners are long gone. The attic was my refuge as a child, a place where fantasies filled the air as thickly as the dust motes drifting lazily in the shafts of sunlight. How ironic that now, years later, it would be this same place that shattered the foundations of my family. I had returned to clear it out after my mother's passing. It was supposed to be a simple task, cataloging what needed to be kept, sold, or discarded. I had not expected to uncover a chronicle that would unravel our family's carefully curated image. As I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, the diary felt heavy in my hands. Its cover was worn, the leather cracked with age, a metaphor for the cracks I was about to see in my own life. With a deep breath, I pried it open, my heart pounding in anticipation. The first entry was dated 30 years ago, before I was even born. The handwriting was elegant and familiar, my mother's script, the same that signed birthday cards and Christmas greetings. Initially, it was filled with the typical musings of a young woman, newly married and full of dreams. Her words painted a picture of happiness I had always believed to be genuine. But as I continued to read, the tone shifted. The words became darker, tinged with regret and admissions that felt like slaps to my face. Each sentence sent shockwaves through my very core. The loving facade crumbled away, revealing layers of lies, secrets, and betrayals. "I feel trapped in this charade," she wrote in an entry dated the week of my 5th birthday. "The walls are closing in, eroding the smiles we plaster on for the world." My stomach tightened, and I could feel tears prickling the corners of my eyes. This was not the mother I knew, not the woman who baked cookies with me on cold winter afternoons or who sang lullabies to chase away my nightmares. The words on the page shifted abruptly, revealing her struggles with fidelity and fidelity to herself. "Another woman's perfume on his collar," she wrote on one occasion. "The same lip shade as mine, mocking in its similarity. How many others?" The diary entries continued, each more revealing than the last. "Today, I met a man, kind and comforting where others have been harsh. His eyes speak of a future untainted by deceit." I couldn't breathe. My mind swirled with questions. Who was he? Did my mother, the woman I admired and loved beyond words, have an affair? And if so, with whom? There were more revelations to come, drops of poison bleeding from the past, forming a narrative I was unprepared to face alone. I read on, desperate to know more, yet equally frightened of the devastation each new line might bring. My journey through the diary was not a solitary one. Beside me lay a family heirloom, a photograph of my parents on their wedding day. They stood under a cherry blossom tree, lips frozen in matching smiles. Now, the image seemed to mock me, a stark reminder of their public persona, all the while concealing the shadows lurking beneath. As I sat there, immersed in the stories of infidelity and secrecy, something inside me steeled itself. I realized a bitter truth: the life I thought was real had been nothing but a mirage, a masterpiece of deceit crafted by those dear to me. I had to know more. The truth was both a flame and a shadow, illuminating and consuming. There was something else tucked into the back of the diary, a series of letters bound with a faded ribbon. They bore no address but were sealed with a kiss of lipstick, another piece of a puzzle I was desperate to complete. The attic was silent, save for the whisper of the pages turning, and I felt the weight of the world shift as the pieces began to fall into place. My mother had lived a life I never knew, filled with love, deception, and a longing for truth. Her diary may have been her confession, but it had become my verdict, a sentence that demanded justice. What came next would depend on what I might find in those letters. I could feel a sense of impending justice brewing within me, a need to confront these ghosts that had haunted our home for decades. With a trembling hand, I untied the ribbon from the bundle of letters. Each envelope felt fragile, like touching the edges of a forgotten dream. I opened the first one cautiously, peeling back the years to uncover untold stories resting between the pages. The letter was addressed to my father, but it was not from my mother. The handwriting was small and precise, hinting at a person who carefully considered their words. "Jake," it began, "I've been thinking about us, about what these past few months have meant. It's more than a fling. You know it, and so do I." My heart dropped as I read the name at the bottom. Emily. My mother's best friend, the woman who had been like an aunt to me. The name stared back at me, brazen and unapologetic, unraveling the connection with every written line. The letters were intermittent, not all dated consecutively. Each one painted a portrait of a love affair that was both passionate and tumultuous. I could almost hear Emily's voice, could almost see her in my mind's eye, laughing at family cookouts and playing with me as a child under the warm summer sun. It all seemed like some cruel joke. I continued to sift through the letters, each one a shard of glass cutting deeper into my already fractured world. Emily's words mixed declarations of love with the occasional admonition of guilt. "We never meant for this to happen," she wrote in one letter. "But how can something that feels so right between us be wrong?" The next letter pulled me deeper into despair. "Your daughter deserves to know the truth," Emily insisted. "It's not fair to her, to live a lie." My daughter. The phrase rang hollow, echoing inside my chest. What truth did they mean? It was as if the letters had become a Pandora's box of family secrets, and each line spilled more than I could bear. I found myself caught between a past I thought I knew and a present that was unraveling faster than I could comprehend. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had to stay strong, had to keep pushing forward to uncover the heart of this deception. Amidst the turbulence of emotions, one letter stood out. It bore a simple line that sent a shiver down my spine: "The child, Jake, she deserves to know who her real father is." My mind reeled. I felt as though the world had shifted off its axis. Everything I knew, or thought I knew, about my life, my identity, now hung in the balance, suspended by the precarious truth hidden in those words. The revelation simmered within me, forming a concoction of anger and desperation. My fingers trembled with a need for answers. Who was my real father? Could it possibly be true? And why was this kept from me? I closed my eyes, attempting to piece together the fragments of my shattered identity. Memories rushed back. Birthday parties with Emily smiling warmly in the background, her laughter blending with my father's deeper tones, their closeness evident even then. I had to know more. There were still letters left unopened, and though my heart ached with the weight of this discovery, I continued reading, driven by a relentless need to understand. Amidst the wrenching turmoil, an entry in the back of the diary caught my attention. It felt different, set apart from the confessions and emotional spillages. A small note, written hastily, yet with clarity: confrontation. Tomorrow, the truth must be faced, once and for all. The words hung suspended in the quiet attic air, a promise or perhaps a threat. My mother had known, likely for years. But had she confronted them? Or had the truth been buried, a hidden undercurrent flowing beneath the surface of our family life? I slammed the diary shut, breathing heavily. I knew there was only one way to seek the truth of these hidden lives and lies. Confrontation was inevitable. The pieces of my family's history had to be laid bare and examined in the harsh light of reality. Driven to this reluctant resolution, I descended the attic stairs slowly, each step resonating in the stillness of the house, echoing the resolve forming in my heart. I needed answers, and it was time to find them, no matter the cost. The gathering storm of emotions was palpable. My heart thudded a relentless rhythm as I picked up the phone. Each ring brought a fresh wave of anticipation and apprehension, until finally, a familiar voice answered on the other end. "Emily," I began, my voice steady, though my insides churned. "We need to talk." There was a pause, a moment that stretched into eternity, before her voice came back, quiet and wary. "About what, dear?" I hesitated, the weight of the revelation bearing down on me. "It's about my mother, and you." I found the letters. There was silence, a thick, impenetrable void into which my words had fallen. I could almost imagine her, standing there with the receiver pressed to her ear, trying to process the unraveling thread of secrecy. "We should meet," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. The next day, I arrived at Emily's home. The place was like an old photo, faded with time but not forgotten. Her garden, once vibrant with life and color, seemed to sigh with the weight of the years that had passed. Emily opened the door, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of trepidation and something else, perhaps relief. We sat together, the letters spread between us on her kitchen table, like a tapestry of confessions and betrayals. She didn't deny it. "I loved him," she said simply, her voice heavy with the resignation of someone who had carried a burden for too long. "But I never meant for any of this to hurt you, dear." I listened, grappling with the mix of anger and sympathy that her confession invoked. But I needed more than apologies and regret. I needed the truth. "Who is my father, Emily?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, they mirrored the same despair I felt deep inside. When she spoke, her words were soft but cut like a knife. "Jake is your father in every way that matters. But biologically, it was never confirmed." My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat echoing in the silence. She continued, her voice trembling. "I never knew for certain. Your mother, she tried to forgive, to move past it. We both did. It was a mistake, but you were never in doubt to us. We loved you, all of us." The room felt suffocating, the air thick with the ghosts of the past. I had come seeking answers, but all I found were more questions. The truth, as elusive as ever, flickered like a will-o'-the-wisp, keeping just out of reach. "I need to know," I insisted, barely able to contain the edge of desperation. "I need the whole truth." Emily nodded slowly. "There's a way to finally know, to lay it all to rest." She suggested a DNA test, a definitive measure that could unravel the essential truth from beneath the decades of lies. It was a moment of reckoning, one I hadn't fully prepared for. I felt the tug of years pulling at me, the intertwining lives and loves beckoning me to see them clearly at last. Despite the turmoil, there was a flicker of hope kindling within me. The truth, once uncovered, might bring the closure I needed and pave a way forward to heal. But as I agreed to the test, I knew that the unraveling strands of this long-buried secret would soon weave tightly with a confrontation far more explosive than anything I had yet faced. An outcome awaited that none of us could predict, but one that demanded to be addressed. The days following our decision to undergo DNA testing were a blur, tinged with anxiety and a tense anticipation of what was to come. Emily had agreed to do the test with me, ensuring that there could be no lingering doubts once the results arrived. It was a daunting prospect, standing on the precipice of potentially life-altering information, and yet it felt like the only way forward, the only path to uncovering the truth once and for all. As I awaited the results, I thought often of my mother, the choices she had made, the struggles she had endured. Her words from the diary echoed in my mind, underscoring the complexity of the situation, a profound love marred by secrecy and betrayal. I wondered what she would think of all this, whether she had wished for the truth to come out after her passing, or if she had hoped I would never open that dusty diary at all. Days turned into a week, and every passing moment seemed stretched out and taut, like a rubber band on the verge of snapping. I went about my daily routine, but beneath the surface, my mind was a turmoil of thoughts and emotions, all revolving around the central question: what would the test reveal? Then, one morning, the email arrived like a bell tolling in the quiet solitude of the house. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart racing, before finally summoning the courage to open it. I clicked on the message, my eyes skimming quickly over the polite preamble to the heart of the matter, the results themselves. The words were there, black and white, definitive and unyielding. My heart stopped, then resumed with a crash of realization. The truth was undeniable now, a bridge irrevocably crossed. Jake, the man I had always called father, was not biologically mine. It was devastating in its certainty, a final unraveling of the tapestry that had formed my identity. The weight of that knowledge settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I sat down, the room spinning slightly around me, as I tried to process the full impact of what I had learned. How does one reconcile a lifetime of beliefs with a single truth that changes everything? In the turmoil, I felt an odd sense of detachment, as though I were watching a scene play out in someone else's life. But the emotions that surged within me were unmistakably my own: sorrow, anger, confusion, and, somewhere beneath it all, a kernel of resolution. I would have to confront my father, confront Jake, the man who had raised me, loved me, and yet hidden such a monumental truth from me. The conversation with Emily was difficult, filled with silences heavy with everything we both wanted to say but couldn't. She apologized, repeatedly and earnestly, her guilt etched into every word. But apologies couldn't change the past, they couldn't erase the years of deception or the painful revelations. "I never wanted this to hurt you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not just about the hurt, Emily," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's about everything. My whole life has been built on a lie. I need to understand why." We spoke for hours, going over the years as if somehow dissecting the past could offer a clearer perspective. But it only made me feel more adrift, more uncertain of who I was in light of this newfound reality. My meeting with Jake loomed ahead like a storm on the horizon. I couldn't put it off, not now that I knew the truth. We met at a small cafe, a neutral ground where emotions could hopefully be kept in check. He arrived on time, as always, his face lined with the all-too-familiar features that I had seen reflected back at me for years. When I looked at him now, I felt a pang of emotional dissonance. Here was the man who had loved and cared for me, yet his face was a reminder of the deception beneath that love. We sat in silence for a while, the unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, I pushed the printout of the DNA results across the table. He glanced at the paper, then back at me, his eyes filled with a sadness that resonated deep within me. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Jake sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years of secrets. "Your mother and I, we believed it was best to keep it in the past. We didn't want to hurt you, to disrupt everything you knew. But it was my right to know," I pressed, my anger mingling with a desperate need for understanding. He nodded, his gaze dropping to the table. "You're right. In hindsight, maybe we should have told you. But we were afraid of what it would mean for you, for us as a family." His confession was tinged with regret, the kind that comes only from years of internal conflict. I wanted to scream, to shake him and demand answers to the questions swirling in my mind. But seeing the pain etched on his face, the remorse in his eyes, made it hard to maintain that anger. "Did you hate him?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "The man who might be my real father?" Jake paused, considering the question. "I didn't hate him. He was a good man, and I knew that. Your mother cared for him deeply, and in some ways, I think I grew to respect him, despite everything." The admission surprised me, offering a different perspective on a story I had only just begun to unravel. It seemed the complexities of human relationships were far more tangled than I had ever appreciated. As we talked, the initial shock of the revelation gave way to a quieter, more contemplative grief. I realized that while my father was not biologically linked to me, his love and dedication had been real. In some ways, his willingness to raise me as his own was a testament to the depth of his character. The conversation, though difficult, was cathartic. It opened the door to healing, to understanding, and perhaps, in time, forgiveness. But even as we reconciled, I knew there were still pieces missing from this intricate puzzle. I needed to know more about the man who was my biological father, the other half of my genetic makeup. What was he like? Did he know about me? Was he even still alive? The journey for answers wasn't over yet, instead, it had taken on a new dimension, one that I was determined to explore further. There was still much to uncover, many layers left to peel back before I could find peace with my identity and the legacy left behind by my parents' choices. And so, with the first part of my journey completed, I resolved to continue seeking the truth. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with potential for pain and healing alike. But I was no longer the person I had been when I first opened that diary. I was stronger, fortified by the truth, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. In the days that followed the confrontation with Jake, the weight of my newfound reality settled over me like a tangible presence. Acknowledging the truth had been the first step, but now the path forward loomed, uncertain and fraught with emotional complexity. I was determined to find out more about my biological father, driven by a need to reconcile the past with my present. Emily, despite the turmoil my discovery had caused, offered her support in the way she knew best, through the shared history she had with my parents. Over coffee in her sunlit kitchen, we combed through old photographs and letters, piecing together fragments of a life I had never known. "This was him," she said, handing me a faded photograph of a man whose smile was both gentle and familiar. His eyes, a mirror of my own, spoke volumes across the years. His name was David. He was a good man, kind-hearted, but life took him elsewhere. My heart constricted as I studied his face, desperately trying to see some part of myself within those features. "What happened to him?" Emily hesitated before answering, her eyes clouded with the shadows of the past. "After your mother and he parted ways, he left town. He wanted to start fresh, I think. We lost touch, but he sent a letter once, hoping to reconnect with your mother." She handed me another letter, yellowed with age, its edges soft with wear. My hands shook slightly as I read his words, filled with longing and regret. He had never stopped caring for my mother, or me, though he had respected her decision to stay with Jake. Something in the letter struck a chord deep within me, a wish for happiness, regardless of the path they had chosen. It was a sentiment that echoed my own desires for closure and peace. "Do you think he's still out there?" I asked, the question hanging heavily between us. Emily sighed, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. "It's hard to say. Life takes unexpected turns, but perhaps it's worth finding out." Her encouragement sparked a flicker of hope, a possibility that had seemed out of reach only days before. And so, armed with the information I had and the support of those around me, I began my search for David. It was a journey that took time, filled with dead ends and small triumphs. I scoured public records and reached out to old acquaintances who might have known him, each step bringing me closer to understanding where he had gone. The process was therapeutic in its own way, allowing me to come to terms with my identity and the legacy left behind by my parents. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found a lead, a small town upstate where he had reportedly settled years ago. It was a place far removed from where my life had begun, but somehow, it felt like the culmination of everything I had been seeking. The town was quaint and unassuming, nestled amidst rolling hills and sprawling forests. As I drove through the main street, my heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. I had come to the end of my journey, but the outcome was still uncertain. I found myself at the doorstep of a modest house, the sort of place where life moved at a slower, more forgiving pace. The garden was well tended, a testament to someone who cared deeply about their surroundings. With a deep breath, I knocked on the door, each rap echoing through the stillness. Moments later, the door opened to reveal a man whose features were instantly recognizable. The years had etched lines on his face, but the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable. "David?" I asked, my voice unexpectedly steady. He paused, studying me with a gaze that seemed to search for something familiar. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" I hesitated, unsure how to articulate the tangled narrative that had brought me here. But there was something in his demeanor, a gentle curiosity, that urged me to continue. "My name is Sarah," I began. "I believe. I think you're my biological father." The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as he processed the revelation. Then a flicker of recognition sparked in his eyes, and his expression softened with understanding. "I had wondered if this day would come," he said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. We settled in his cozy living room, where the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the floor. Over the course of our conversation, we unearthed memories and stories, stitching together the fractured pieces of our shared history. David spoke of the past with a gentle reverence, recounting his time with my mother and the choices that had defined their paths. I listened, captivated by the insight he provided into a life I had only glimpsed through others' eyes. "I never stopped thinking about you, about her," he admitted, his voice tinged with the wistfulness of years gone by. "I hoped you were living a good life, surrounded by love." His words touched something deep within me, resonating with an achingly familiar truth. Despite the circumstances, I realized that love had been a constant thread woven through the fabric of my life, from Jake's unwavering devotion to the shared moments I now experienced with David. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink, I felt a profound sense of catharsis. My quest for truth had led me to this moment, where past and present converged in a harmony I hadn't imagined possible. We parted with the promise of future meetings, an acknowledgement that the journey of discovery was far from over. As I drove away, the emotions that had weighed me down were transformed, lightened by the clarity of understanding and the potential for new beginnings. Returning home, I found myself embracing the complexities of my identity, thankful for the truths I had uncovered and the bonds that had withstood the test of time. My relationship with Jake, though altered by revelation, was no less meaningful. We shared moments of healing and forgiveness, strengthened by the knowledge that love transcends biology, anchoring us in its unshakable foundation. In the end, the diary that had set me on this path became a cherished keepsake, a reminder of the resilience and courage it took to face the past and embrace the future. Through its pages, I found not only the truth of my origins but also the power of reconciliation and the enduring strength of family, however unconventional it may be. As I put the past to rest, I felt a sense of peace settle within me, a calm certainty that whatever lay ahead, I would face it with the unwavering support of those I loved. The truth had indeed set me free, and with it came the dawn of a new chapter, one filled with hope, understanding, and the promise of a life authentically lived.